All right, come on in, folks. We have a lot to talk about here, a lot to process. Share the link if you would, tnholler.com, at the tnholler on Twitter and Facebook. Follow all the hollers, all that good stuff. You know the drill already. Chip in $10 or more, you get one of these sweet hats that we're wearing. And tnholler.com is also where you can go to subscribe to get our emails to catch up on all the nuts crap that's going on. First of all, I think the first thing we should do, because this is our first show since this happened, is celebrate the fact that we have a new president, that we do have a new president here.
Yes. Very exciting.
That did happen. Like,
it's a real thing.
I know they're like trying to make us question reality here, but no, that happened. It actually happened the day before it happened. And I had a little dance party that was a little premature, but it happened. And then the rest of the country had a dance party on Saturday, and that happened. And now we have a situation where we have a sore loser president who is trying to overthrow and overturn the results of this election, which I think people need to start calling the coup that it is. This is an attempt at a coup.
It's definitionally accurate. Like that is the definition of a coup. There's actually this movement that it's not even it's just an organization that has kind of formed in the lead up to this election, because obviously he's been hinting at this for a really long time. And their whole thing, it's like it's called Choose Democracy. We posted about it. So if you want to see these resources, you should definitely check it out. But they talk about like how important it is to actually call it what it is. Yeah. And they actually have a coup-o-meter, which I could maybe flash up on the screen. But right, and they have democracy, preparing for a coup, attempted coup, and coup. And right now it's preparing for a coup, because we all just heard what Pompeo said. And I'm sure that, Justin, you have the clip for that, because that was truly frightening.
Yeah, let's go ahead. And this is the thing that Biden just got asked about. And by the way, this is a holler hour where we want you guys to hop in and talk to us. So feel free to message us for the link, and you can jump in and tell us how you feel about the coup that we're currently seeing. Thank you, Mark, for saying that you like our page. But we're going to go ahead and play. This is the clip that is shocking people right now, where this is Pompeo essentially saying that this is that there's going to be a smooth transition to a second Trump term. This is what Pompeo just said.
Smooth transition to a second Trump administration. Right. We're ready. The world is watching what's taking place here. We're going to count all the votes.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, okay. First of all, the cockiness and self-assuredness with which he says that is chill-inducing down the spine, because it's like these guys know something. Yeah. You know, he says it like they know something, like they've game played this, they've played it out, and they know that there's no stopping them. And you know, like the more I think about it, the more I'm like, who does stop them? I don't know. Like I thought it was the people. Did we stop them? Did we not stop them? It feels like we stopped them, but now like what comes next? And you know, we see people that are congratulating him that are Republicans. There are some that are doing it, but we also see a lot that seem willing to do the wrongest thing here. So it's possible that we are overreacting to what they're saying, but it certainly does not feel like it when you have the Secretary of State saying we are ready for a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. Mm-hmm. And then he says the world is watching. The world sure is watching. I don't understand how we would export democracy anywhere in the world if we did this here in our own country. Let's just watch a couple more seconds of it.
When the process is complete, there'll be electors selected. There's a process.
See, he goes right to electors selected.
Yep.
And that is the scary part, because the weakness in all of this is that it is constitutionally the state legislatures that assign electors, And what I've heard is that they would have had to declare that before the election. So it actually isn't legal for the state legislatures to suddenly disregard the election and just assign electors to Trump. But who's going to put it past anybody to do that right now? It's hard to even imagine. So the fact that he goes right to the electors that's a little bit of a tell of what he might be thinking here. And that scares me. Let's keep going.
Constitution lays it out pretty clearly.
See, he goes to the Constitution. So now he's talking about electors and the Constitution, which is, I mean, to me, that looks like a tell where he's saying that's the part that we're going to focus on. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think that, they, as you said, I think that it's very possible that they've, and likely that they've gamed this out. And also that, like, even if they're not exactly where they want to be with all of this, it's asserting all of these as facts, like just all of these assertions that also like helps get them power. And the fact that like they have the political capital and they're using it, with their entire party, most leaders in their party, there are just a few exceptions, are saying that Joe Biden, they're not saying that Joe Biden has won the election. They're saying count the votes. Like
they're doing, and every day that passes seems to give this garbage more legitimacy and seems to like convince more and more of their flock that there's a path here.
It's in the data, actually.
And they told us this was going, I mean, we don't need to get into like how illegitimate this all is. Like, there is no evidence of widespread systemic fraud. Republican secretaries of state in Georgia, for example, are telling us that, in Nevada, they're trying to throw out the votes of military folks. In Pennsylvania, which is the one place that they may have some sort of legitimate court case, the votes that they're worried about there, that are the late arriving votes, are like 7,000, and he's down like 45,000. So it wouldn't be enough. So, on a legitimate level, they did these avenues are not real avenues. And so like, but they're not really looking at it that way. It seems like they have something else in mind here. And right now it feels like a delay and stalling to put something else in place, which just seems to be what he's alluding to. I'm just going to play a little bit more of him.
The world should have every confidence that the transition necessary to make sure that the State Department is functional today, successful today, and successful with the president.
I mean, he just goes on, and then there's a follow-up here, and
significant leads with 99% reporting are going to be overturned, and that the United States failed to conduct.
He's like, are you saying this is a failed election?
I'm the Secretary of State. I'm getting calls from all across the world. These people are watching our election. They understand that we have a legal process.
This is just gobbledygook. But, the point here is he is definitely saying that it's going to be Trump. Like he said it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's
so
exactly what he said.
That is some treasonous garbage. And that's coming from the Secretary of State. Like he's acting like he's some guy in a Facebook group somewhere.
Yeah.
But no,
he's on Parler.
Right. He's just on Parler saying this stuff. He's not. And then, let's go ahead and watch. This is Biden getting asked about what he just said, and he sort of laughs it off.
Of any of the assertions made by the president or Secretary of State Pompeo. State Pompeo.
I mean, I'm glad he's laughing. I'm glad he's laughing.
I'm not shaking my head at that. I'm just the whole thing is just so absurd. Like and I'm glad that he's treating it as absurd, but I think that Democrats need to use 100%, 110% of their political capital to push back on this. And what people can do, I've posted this link a few times that I'll, in the comments. Please check that website out. That has some really great resources of ways to get involved. And you can also be alerted, if, by the metrics that they're using, if a coup attempt is really full blown, then the best way to combat it is to literally get in the streets, like a mass mobilization of people.
I mean, if this starts to pick up steam, it's going to be chaos. There will be people in the streets.
We have to.
We have to, and we're just going to. There's no question. It's just going to be madness, and it's never going to stop. The resistance that you saw for 4 years of the administration will pale in comparison. If they attempt to do this, it's never going to stop, and it will throw this country into chaos. And I have to think that they know that. I mean, I think that they know that. I think they're just trying to let him land softly. I hope that's what's going on.
I don't know about that, though.
I don't know either, but I mean, I'm that's my hope.
Because this is this is how fast, and I really don't want to be alarmist. I really hope that none of this happens. But just the most alarming thing for me that has happened thus far is having the Secretary of State say this out loud.
That was the most alarming, yes.
That's been the most alarming thing. So, I
But-
think that we still need to take things one step at a time. However, I think that it's good to be like clear-eyed about how, if it does continue in this direction, this is how fascism takes hold in other countries.
100%. This is
yeah.
exactly the path, and it already started. What this
Right.
shows us is this started a long time ago, that the capitulation of the Republicans, has enabled this, has paved way for it. They are now complicit. They are un-American. They are unpatriotic. They are traitors. Like, use these words,
Yeah.
because this is what it is right now.
Right.
But the one thing I will say is Fox has been fairly good about resisting this stuff. I'm just going to show a clip here. This is when Kayleigh McEnany started saying some bullshit, and they cut
Right.
away from her.
We want every legal vote to be counted, and we want every illegal vote to be
Well, I just think we have to be very clear. She's charging, the other side is welcoming fraud and welcoming illegal voting. Unless she has more details to back that up, I can't in good countenance continue showing you this. I want to make sure that maybe they do have something to back that up.
Good. See, like, that's nice to see,
Mhm.
and Fox has called the election, and like, they have been doing a pretty good job. Some of them. I mean, look,
Yeah.
there's day and night
Not
on
the
that network. Like, you
commentators,
go
but-
down to the nighttime guys,
Yeah.
and you've got, Tucker Carlson,
Hannity
Sean
and-
Hannity, Laura Ingraham ruining this country on a constant basis. But daytime Fox has been pretty clear, that Joe Biden is the next president, and that's to their credit on a certain level.
I am grateful for it, to be
Yeah.
honest. I both my parents are Fox News watchers. It's pretty much their only news source, and I think that the only reason that they're not on the Tucker Carlson train is because they're 100% with this, is because there are other people on Fox saying being level-headed about it. So
Right.
I'm grateful for it, to be honest.
And then there are people like our fair Senator Marsha Blackburn, who she constantly is on the wrong side of everything, and she had this to say.
Hey everybody, I have to tell you, the media does not decide.
Who called Trump's election?
I mean, yeah, she says the people decide. Yes, the people decided, and the media told us who the people decided. That's how that works, Marsha. Like, this is how it's gone since the 1800s. Like, AP has been calling elections for centuries. Like, this is ridiculous. And look, I mean, first of all, look at that frozen expression. I mean, I can't even.
That's
I can't
I'm gonna
even
have to
look
take
at
a
this
screen
person.
grab of that or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be seeing that in my nightmares. But she just is constantly on the wrong side of everything. She is a traitor, un-American, complicit. That's what this all is. And anybody who is taking this position has to be called out for it.
Yeah. 100%. Like it needs to be called out with full force. Like wherever there's a wedge for pressure. I think that Mary Barnes said pressure GSA to authorize the Biden transition. That actually is something, that folks can do. I don't know how much, because she takes her word from, McConnell and others. So I don't know how much like leverage we have, but really anything that we can do is at this point is what we should be doing. We need to be putting as much pressure on these folks as possible. And
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, again, just to like reiterate, there's no evidence of widespread fraud.
No.
The instances that they've brought up have been shot down for the most part. The one that like seemed to have a little bit of traction was the Michigan glitch, but there's now been investigations into it where, we know what happened. It was a human error. They didn't update the software. So now they have, and they fixed it. They caught it. That was one county in Michigan. Again, it wouldn't have put them anywhere near what he needed to flip. Michigan's like, he's down like 100,000 votes there. So there's nothing there. The other part of this is Democrats, if they had this like coordinated effort to steal these elections, did a shitty ass job of stealing the election. Like, they didn't steal the Senate. Down ballot, they got their asses blown off. Like,
and
how can you possibly? This is the same election. Are you
they're
questioning
on the
those results
same?
too?
They're on the same ballot.
That's on the
Like
same
these
ballot.
things. So they're only questioning the presidential election, the presidential race. But then, like the reasons that they won, a lot of these down ballot races, those winnings were on the same fucking ballots.
Yes.
Like it's absurd.
It's completely absurd, and just defies logic. Like,
Yeah.
this whole thing defies logic. And then the other part of this is what our enemies wanted. like more than anything that has happened to delegitimize our democratic process, to delegitimize democracy in general, is the number one thing on the menu for Putin, regardless of what you think he did with Trump, getting him in office, whatever he did, by the way. But regardless of what you think about all of that, what he would have wanted in doing that, the reason he's rooting for that is what they're giving them right now. And they didn't even have to do anything this time because this is how complicit this party has become. And it's such a damn tragedy. And it's not just at the national level. Governor Lee is doing this shit too. You know, Governor Lee is joining him right along, the good soldier Governor Lee, even as, you know, people are dying and the virus is running wild in Tennessee. Governor Lee is joining right along in this effort not to recognize Trump. And I thought Yarborough really said it best. He said, we're going to see who's a Republican and who's a banana Republican. And I think we're seeing way more banana Republicans.
Yep, it's majority banana Republicans. And it's like, it's all about power. I mean, in my opinion, that's what it all comes down to. They want to stay in power. They see, you know, this sort of like moving more and more towards authoritarianism. Obviously, you get more power that way because it's undemocratic.
Right.
So they have less power, like the people have less power in their hands, which means that they have more power in theirs. And they like that.
Right. If you think about it, it's the natural extension of the anti-democracy idealism. So, you know, what is the opposite of democracy? It's authoritarianism. Like, how do you maintain minority rule? You move away from democracy towards exactly this. All they really needed was somebody who was willing to be shameless enough to do all of this. And then they just followed their lead. And, you know, Republican voters are not exempt from this, because if there was actually a price to be paid at the ballot box for doing this un-American garbage, they wouldn't be doing it. But Republican voters are along for this ride and down for it. And, you know, I definitely fault the leaders more because they're supposed to be leading, but it's hard not to look at our neighbors and go, hey, are you guys cool with what's going on here?
I think that's important. I think that social pressure is really important, which I think, you know, is part of the reason why I really, you know, obviously approve of what we do here at the Holler. We shame people. And you know, we like to be punching up. We like to be punching at the people who are actually in power, the people that have power. You know, that's, I think, who should get the majority of our shame. However, if you're having a conversation with someone that just seems like they're totally cool with this, they need to be called out.
Right. Right. This is where we have to turn to each other and say, hey, this is not okay. Like, okay, fine. You looked past all the other shit, but like, we're at a point now where this is how the cookie crumbles right here. Like, if we don't have elections that we respect, then the rest of it falls apart. Like, this is where it falls apart. So, you know, and then the flip side is like, imagine if we had been doing this, and that leads me to another clip that I wanted to play here. Like, this was after the 2016 election. Look at what they were doing.
Democrats are being sore losers. They refuse to acknowledge they lost the election. So what do? They cry malfeasance, wrongdoing, criminality, fraud.
Democrats, more so than Republicans, seem to have a problem conceding defeat. Either the election system broke down or some mystery votes are hiding somewhere.
You have a whole series of Democrats who just said bluntly, if our candidate doesn't win, they stole the election. I
mean, you get the idea. There's a minute of that.
Who put Rachmaninoff underneath that?
That's the Daily Show, because everything they do is amazing. I mean, like, look at that. That's just like, there's nothing even to say about that. These people are shameless hypocrites. And, you know, the idea, like, there's now this big pushback of, because Biden is calling for unity and they're saying, oh, where was your unity for the last 4 years? And, you know, these are people like Ben Shapiro, who, you know, we have pictures of him holding a literal jar of liberal tears, saying this garbage, leftist tears. Like, yes, we pushed back. We did not question the results of the election, the outcome of the election, even though there were probably more malfeasance last time than there was this time. And also what they're ignoring is the 8 years that preceded that, when they did everything they could to make Obama ineffective and steal Supreme Court seats from him, and refuse to sit judges, and refuse to pass healthcare, and try to repeal his healthcare plan 40 times. Like, so don't act like the world started when Trump won. That is simply not true. And Trump was being an asshole way before he was inaugurated.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, it's just whatever narrative, and everybody is guilty of this at some point or another. I know I am as well, but like, it goes beyond just like using a narrative that's like beneficial to you. Like when it's something that's like actively destroying our democracy, it's like that's it. Just crosses so many lines.
This is the line. Like, where's the line? This is the line.
And we've been tripping over lines for 4 years now. Like, it's just, we're so, and we're at this point where, I mean, this is their last, I mean, of course, like, I think we also need to be clear-eyed that moving forward, if, God willing, we're able to get Trump out of the picture, that, they see this playbook and they're only going to build on it unless we continue to push back with force.
100%.
And that's, again, where I come back to how important it is for us to pressure our politicians, our Democratic politicians, and our Republican. I mean, in Tennessee, we don't have a lot of choice, but just to be pressuring our Democrats, especially, to use 110% of their political capital to push back on this, because we need our leaders to push back against fascist coup attempts.
Yes. Someone asked, how do we push Tennessee media to ask hard questions of Governor Lee? I got to say,
good question.
Obviously, I always wish they asked harder questions, and they won't let us into those press conferences. By the way, I've asked for the Zoom link, and for some reason, they don't give it to us.
Why?
I don't know. But I will say that, to their credit, the media that is there generally asks pretty good questions. I mean,
there's some great reporters. Yeah,
there's some great reporters. Usually, there are things that I would like to see asked that don't get asked, but a lot of times they do ask the things that you want to see them ask, especially Phil Williams, Natalie Allison does it, and then they follow up. Alex Apple's another one. So I will say that they do it, but Governor Lee has this way of condescending non-answers. Like,
saying nothing.
He says nothing, right? So like, he'll just say, he'll move on. He'll like move on to talking about some high-minded bullshit and not really answer the question that they're asking of him. So it's not always their fault, I guess, is what I'm kind of saying. And, but we do need to pressure them to ask those questions. And I think you're asking the right question there. So, and one of the things that we were talking about that we wanted to talk about today, and we were hoping that Eoin would join us, is sort of this other conversation that has come up now about, what went wrong and what comes next. And I think that is sort of the question that is on a lot of people's minds. We saw, moderate, I guess, Democrats come out swinging against progressives, essentially trying to pin, the lack of wins on them. And I think you and I both took issue to that. And, one of the clips that I saw that I thought really summed it up nicely was this from Yvette Simpson.
Question is, how much more do we need to give? I always say this: unity is great, but freedom is better. And there's a part of this population that has sacrificed their freedom time and time again for unity. And they're tired of it. Yes, we want to have compromise. Yes, we want bipartisanship, but it shouldn't cost people wages and health care and education. And so if you're asking us to come together, and that means that my world doesn't change, the people whose world needs to change doesn't change, I don't want that kind of unity. I want the kind of unity that leads to change for people who have waited for it. And if this pandemic hasn't showed us that we need to serve people first, and that needs to be a unifying message. The Republicans need to be on board with actually taking care of people. If we can unify around that, I'm all for it. But if that means that we're going to compromise and we're going to continue to serve the 1%, the people who we have always served, that's not the kind of unity we need right now.
I mean, I think that's really, really good. Yeah. And, it really nails it. Like, the unity that's being called for is not unity. In some ways, like unity with rhetoric. Okay, great. Like, yes, let's tone down the rhetoric, tone down the divisiveness, but unity policy wise is not the status quo. It cannot be. And we're already seeing people sort of throw up their hands and go, okay, well, I've even seen some people say, well, it might be a good thing that Republicans control the Senate, because it takes the pressure off the push to pass healthcare.
You will get nothing.
You'll get nothing. Pass healthcare, pass wages, all these other things that are actually going to help people with stimulus, even, because McConnell will do nothing. And that's what he always does. So, that is not unity. That is not a compromise. And we can have a longer discussion about, what went wrong in this election, so to speak, although Biden won by a lot and they did take a seat in the Senate. And, a lot of the House seats they lost, I think, were in pretty generally red districts. But I think we need to get specific about that and not act like, oh, the problem is that we want to change things.
Yeah, I think that that's. I mean, I think that a lot of people, and again, obviously Biden himself is winning by a really large margin, but in a lot of districts, like, those coattails were not as strong as we thought they were going to be, based off of most metrics that we had,
Right.
before the election. And I think, we need to wait for some more data to come out on analyzing all of those issues.
Correct.
But I think that going back to what that clip was saying, if we, I know I say this all the time, but we need to have like a strong counter to conservatism.
Right.
Like if you're running on conservative light, people are just going to vote for the Republican, and then your base is not going to be energized to vote for you. And obviously, different districts, there are different ways of running in different districts. There are, it's really hard to be a moderate or to be running in a moderate district in this country. Like, I understand that. But there's a really great, and I don't know if you have this graph in the, on here, but, or this chart, but every single there you go. Yes. Every single representative that has co-sponsored or signed on to Medicare for All won their reelection
in a swing district.
In swing districts
Yes.
across the country. And they all asked, I believe there are 5 of them that asked AOC for help in their running their reelections, just to have like a more modern, flexible, campaign, and they all have won their reelections. And I'm not saying that that's like the only winning factor here.
Right.
But what I am saying, but what I am saying is that running on progressive policies
doesn't
hurt you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Like, you can't ignore that chart. You can't say they won because they ran on Medicare for all,
sure.
But you also can't say Medicare for all was an albatross around their necks and hurt them in those districts, because the evidence just doesn't back that up. And what seemed to be like immediate posturing from people, in what would be considered the centrist part of the party the day after, like that became the story here. And for instance, John Ossoff is running in Georgia, and he's not running a Green New Deal, Medicare for all, defunding the police, which to me, that one needs to be separated out, because that one, I think, the way
I don't know if I would agree with that.
I know you won't agree with that, but I think the way that that's phrased, could be better, is what I would say. Like, I feel like that one rubs a lot of people the wrong way.
I have a counter to that.
That's okay. We can talk about it in a second. But what I was going to say is these are popular. Like, this is in Ossoff's state. Most people back government-run healthcare. Most people back a Green New Deal, climate change. Now, the defund the police thing, let's talk about that for a second. The defund the police thing, first of all, it's not like Democratic progressive candidates came up with that and made that like their platform. That's not what happened. Activists were saying it. It became a refrain. And, what it actually is taking away resources from overfunded police departments, which you can't really argue with. Like, that is not a policy position that Democrats should be turning their back on in any way. Now, defund the police gets spun as take money out of, don't have police departments. That is not what people are saying, although some people might be saying that. That I don't think that's a generally popular policy position in this country, is to not have police departments. I think there are people that believe that, but defund the police, I think, became a sword that was used against them. But I saw what happened here in Tennessee, and defund the police was just a part of it. It was support for the protests that became a sword or a bat that was beat over the head of candidates saying they were pro-criminal. Not saying defund the police isn't going to make them stop doing that. No. Like, to let your policy positions get defined by Republicans and act like you're taking the gun out of their hands if they do that, you're not. They're going to say what they're going to say. Yeah. So, I think at the end of all this, what ends up happening is the authentic candidates, the ones that stand up for what's right, the ones that show that they're incorruptible, those are the ones that shine through and win. And so, being afraid of the phrase defund the police, like, I think we can have a conversation about the phrasing of that. I don't know if that's like the perfect phrasing of it for a campaign or for a politician, but you don't control the activists. They don't serve your agenda. And that's the refrain that they use. And like, you're not going to stop that. So learn to live with it.
That's actually the entire point, or a lot of the point that I was going to make, is that like that the phrase is not going anywhere. That phrase comes from activists on the ground who, and this is, I'm just stating my opinion, that are stating what actually needs to happen in order to help people in a real material way. And so that phrase isn't going anywhere. So politicians, whether they like it or not, if they're in a moderate district or not, are going to have to learn how to deal with it. Because as Justin said, no matter what, like they're going to come after us with the socialist label.
No
they're
matter
gonna come
what.
after us with defund.
They did it to
whatever
Obama.
else. It doesn't matter what we say or do. And again, I think that if you are in a more progressive district and, if it's genuine to your candidacy, that run it and being unabashed, if you genuinely believe this, being unabashed about saying, yes, I support defunding the police because it's about budgeting, and explaining what you said. I think that's really important because that is something that's actually going to help communities in a meaningful way. But if you're running in a more moderate district, that phrase is still not going to go anywhere.
No,
you can change the way that you talk about the issue, and that is on you. There's always going to be issues like that for candidates,
of course.
And so trying to pin that on activists. Also, I'm sorry. There's just one more thing I want to say, and that's about how like over the they're trying to pin this on people that are not peddling, but like that are that are pushing defund the police. I'm sorry, and again, we need to wait for some more evidence to come out on this, but voter registration in swing states shot up because of the George Floyd protests. And they shot up like much more than Republican voter. You can look at, there's some graphs.
Yeah. I think there's no question.
And so there's I think, we'll wait to see how things unfold, but I think there's already some pretty good evidence that the largest movement in the country, the defund the police, the Black Lives Matter movements from this past summer, actually have done a lot to help push us over the edge in winning this election.
But
so if they turn around,
you just conflated the two, and I don't necessarily view them that way. Like you just said, the defund the police, the Black Lives Matter movement, as though it was the same thing.
But I think they are largely the same thing.
But not really, because you don't have defund the police on the basketball court at the NBA, and I'm not saying the NBA defines it, but I'm saying that I think it's a
circle there.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like I think well, it depends how you define it. Like if you ask somebody, do you support Black Lives Matter, and then you ask them, do you support defund the police? I guarantee you're not going to have everybody who supports Black Lives Matter say they all support defund the police.
I agree in terms of supporters. I guess I should have been more clear that if I like the people who are involved in Black Lives Matter, the people that are involved in the movement, I think that is more of a circle. But I agree with you. I think that, obviously support for Black Lives Matter polls way better than support for defund the police.
And that's the only conversation that we're having. And anytime somebody says this to me, like they got to stop saying defund the police, I'm like, you got to stop acting like you could tell them what to say. Like that is not how this works. You don't get to go out there and write signs for activists. Like, have you been to a protest? It's just not how that goes. And the minute they get a picture of anybody with the defund the police sign, they're going to use that in their attack ads anyway. So it doesn't matter what the candidates are saying. And I guarantee you that all of the House candidates that lost in those swing districts that they're worried about, none of them were running on that. None of them said that in their ads. So they're just going to tar you with that brush anyway. This is an interesting comment because of who it's coming from. So I'm going to flash it. Angel, who is like obviously one of the most outspoken activists that we know, says, I agree that defunding the police can be misunderstood easily and agrees with James Clyburn that it might have reelected Graham in South Carolina. Maybe we should instead say gradually divest from the police. It at least inspires the question why. It provokes further conversations like Starr in Colorado. To me, like that's actually quite surprising to me to hear Angel say that, because I would imagine Angel being somebody who says, no way, say it over and over again and make them like it. But she's being pretty realistic about what it means.
I'm just saying the phrase isn't going anywhere is what I'm saying.
And that's my point too. Like if you could huddle the activists around and say, okay, if we want to get people elected, maybe this one is a little bit too far. It's never going to happen. Like that's just not realistic thinking that we're going to get to a place where that happens. So, but maybe it is something for the angels of the world to be saying.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Almost all of us do support defunding the police, though. She says, yeah. And again, I'm not saying that the policy idea is in any way something that people should back away from.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that, sorry, let me rephrase. I again want to restate my support for defund the police, but that's not what matters in this conversation. I think that that it is something where, I mean, of course, again, with every other issue, that like candidates have to find a way of talking about these things. Obviously, long term, I think that that's going to be most beneficial for communities. But it is, you know, it's there are always going to be tough phrases like that candidates are going to have to deal with. And I think that I think that another point that I wanted to make just about this whole conversation about like blaming the left, blaming whoever about all of this, these centrists, like the now infamous House phone call that came out, you know, like a day or two after the election, where a bunch of centrist Democrats who like, you know, used to be in the CIA, like are calling, you know, the left the problem in terms of why we lost, you know, we lost a lot of, you know, down ballot power, and turning around and blaming the left for that. Again, I just want to go back to the massive amount of political engagement that these protests and movements from over the summer sparked for people. And so and so they're not, and they also don't like at least that camp, like the centrist camp, does not give enough credit, I think, to progressives, to leftists that are 9 times out of 10 the ones who are on the ground organizing campaigns. They're the ones putting all their blood, sweat, and tears into trying to get people, you know, into trying to change things, and then they turn around and get blamed for what's happened. And I just think that like they would actually, it's not only just the right thing to do, but it's strategically, it would be better for them if they actually were, you know, it adopted some more left policies and things like that moving forward. And instead of like blaming the left, you know, elevating us into positions where we could actually help things. It goes back to the article or the interview that AOC did with the New York Times. I mean, I completely agree with what she said. Which is
a great segue into Eoin Higgins.
Hey.
Which is how you say that name. Eoin, thank you for joining us. You wrote a great article about the exact thing that we're talking about here, which is the blame game that has already started on the left as far as, you know, who to blame for underperformance in this past election. And first of all, I want to ask you, is that spelling where the name Eoin came from? Was that the original Eoin?
The way EOIN is kind of the in-between Irish and English version of the name Eoin. The more Irish version is EOGHAN.
Okay.
But where it originally comes from is it's just John. It's just John.
Oh wow!
You know, it's like the same.
Never
like
made
Juan.
that connection.
Yeah, and you know any number of the different ways to say that name. Around the world.
This is the article that you wrote. It says Democrats need to clearly embrace popular progressive policies, or they will continue to fail in down ballot elections. So, what got you going down this path to write this particular article in this moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something that I have, written about quite a bit during my career. And, you know, in this case, originally I had been writing about this in a little bit of a different way, kind of just talking about kind of the right and the way that the right wing was reacting to the election. But then, as facts on the ground started to change and Democrats started to do better in some ways and not in other ways, then, kind of reframed and revamped the story a little bit and then started talking about this. And, the thing was that while, as we all know, like while the election results were coming in and as things were kind of shaking out, down ballot didn't go as well as people wanted to, et cetera, we then started to see recriminations against the left, which were always going to happen, right? It was always going to happen that the right was going to say that the results were a reason to not go to the left. No matter what the results would have been, that would have been their response to it. But in this case, it was almost like particularly, more of a cynical response because the exit polling was showing so clearly that, and this is the way that a friend of mine put it on Twitter, and I can't remember who exactly it was. But they said that the Americans are really divided. We're really divided on who they wanted to be president, right? But they were not divided when it came to progressive policies. And the perfect example of that is what happened in Florida when you had $15 minimum wage and Trump wins the state. There's obviously something going on here that's a little more complicated and a little more difficult to understand than to just say red state, blue state, progressive policy, right-wing policy.
Right. And it happened so fast. Like the body was hardly even cold and they were already doing this, and what you're pointing to, which is these progressive policies throughout the country won handily, even as candidates were losing. So clearly there's a detachment between progressive policies and like the party and the people running on them. And these are obviously not albatrosses. And I think what we've found is, like, when you drill down, everything that, like, progressive is mainstream is the thing that we always say. These progressive policy ideas, they poll well. When you talk about what they are, it's when you get caught up in the labels, leftist, progressive, liberal, that's when it gets bogged down and people sort of shy away from it. So it seems like maybe the work is to try to, attach policy to the candidates that are running on them more rather than less. Is that kind of the takeaway that you found? And like, are there numbers to back it up anywhere?
Well, yeah, one thing I mentioned in here, and I've mentioned in a number of articles that I've written, because it's a data point that I find really interesting, is that it has been proven, proven through surveys, that politicians of both parties think that their base are much more conservative, like their constituency is much more conservative than they are, when in reality they're much further to the left
and right.
Somewhat to the right, but when it comes to progressive policies, like the support for progressive policies,
I
like
got you. Okay,
wage,
I see. Okay,
like keeping Roe in
You're saying
place.
even Republicans are to the left of where Republicans think they are.
Right. Well, you have to ask the question in the right way. Like, you have to ask the question, like, here's the policy. Do you agree with the policy? And when you ask people that, they will respond by saying that that they back the policy.
Right.
Even if they, and this has been like, it's been like this for like, I think Michael Moore did a lot of work on this back. Oh man, back in the Bush years, I think he was talking about how, the country is much further to the left than it appears. And so I think that's a big stumbling block. But I think that if Democrats really want to win, they want to win and build the kind of coalition that can win, then they need to tilt left. I mean, there's a reason that, like, Obama and Bill Clinton, right, are two of the greatest rhetoricians and politicians of my lifetime, easily. Just really great speakers. Clinton was really good at empathizing with people. Obama had really soaring rhetoric. But during both their presidencies, you saw massive losses for the Democratic Party. And I think that the reason for that is that they were so unique that what they were selling was almost like less important. Also, slight side note, in 2008, Obama was selling something that he wasn't actually running on. But, that they were selling people on this kind of stuff. And then when they came into power, they instituted these right-wing neoliberal kind of reforms that
didn't change anyone's lives.
Right.
What's that?
It didn't change enough people's lives for the better. Yeah.
Not in material ways, like not really fundamental ways.
Exactly. And Clinton came in after 12 years of like Reagan and then H.W. Bush. And then Obama comes in after 8 years of W. Bush. I mean, these are like three of the worst presidents the country's ever had. I mean, Reagan and Bush, second one, definitely, like no question. And now Biden's coming in after Trump, and so what's going to happen? Looks like he's going to do kind of the same thing. So that's kind of like a long way of kind of coming around to like the point that I'm trying to make. And to answer your question, is just to say that like, if Democrats would just run on, we're going to deliver for you in these ways, I think that we would see, I think Democrats would have a much better, they would have a much better performance at the ballot box, and they would create the kind of like lasting coalitions, like the Obama coalition. Like when people in 2016 said what happened to the Obama coalition, it was like, well, what happened was that it was based in him, much more in him than it was in the party.
Yeah.
But if the party was able to inspire that kind of loyalty,
right, then
I think that we would see like a lot of success. We see a lot of success for the party, and also like things would get better for people.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate, even though I don't even believe it. I'm with you completely, but I have these conversations with good faith conversations, not with Republicans, with Democrats who, I think do support these policies. But what I always hear from them is the most important thing is winning. And they think they're afraid that if we lean too far into the, Bernie side of things, which he is the mantle carrier for it now, and, won't be forever, but is right now. And, AOC is starting to become that, and they've already tarred her with that brush. And frankly, it doesn't help that, even though MLK was a democratic socialist, and, democratic socialism shouldn't scare anybody, it does have socialism in there. So it's a little bit easier to call them socialists when it's got democratic socialism in there. But besides the point, they're worried that if we do that, we're going to lose. And I don't think the numbers bear that out. But until we can sort of disabuse them of that notion somehow with hard evidence, it's going to be hard. It's our word against theirs. How do we get past it's our word against theirs?
Well, I mean, how's that going for you is what you say.
Yes.
Like how's that going? How's that working out for you? Like, you guys just barely won against a president who oversaw the death of like almost 250,000 people, probably over 250,000 people, honestly, if we're really doing the actual numbers here. I think that I have a hard time taking that seriously. I know what you're saying. I totally understand like having the good faith conversation 100%. I do at a certain point, I stop being able to have it though.
I've long since stopped being able to have it. And I'm not an easy person to talk to about this when I'm taking that position. Right. I completely have had it with it, but it's also what they think. And I'm talking about people who, I think in nature are fairly progressive people. They don't think that it's like, there's this notion that like we're already talking about reaching out to Trump voters, and I don't know what they can do to show you they're not coming your way other than vote for this guy a second time.
I think that it's like really, I think we've been sold, as Owen, as you said earlier, like we've been sold these neoliberal half measures for so long that I think that a lot of people have really internalized that this is like, we always have to put forward an already compromised position. Like they're never going to let us get X, Y, and Z passed, so we already have to, it's kind of like the West Wing attitude almost. And so I think that that's just really been internalized by a lot of like Democrats who are making those arguments in good faith. But then as you go up in leadership, those arguments are maybe, being made in good faith sometimes, but it becomes more of a mixture of also they're financially benefiting from the way this is, the status quo. So it's like, we don't want to necessarily push things as hard as possible because
I think that's what's going on. I think that's what's going on with leadership for sure. I'm just talking about the regular folks that, I'm talking to. And again, like, I think when you get past the labels, like, let's talk about the policy. Like, you want everybody to have healthcare. You understand that a stronger middle class is important. You want equal rights for everybody. You don't want, people ripped from their parents at the border. Like, none of these things are like radical and they all poll well, every last one of them. So like, the idea of like lurching left, it's really just about, centering the policy, in my opinion, as opposed to the people and in that way. So that, and then Owen, you did a little digging. Your article was, or no, you tweeted asking Ossoff to look at it. Do you have a sense that Ossoff is a more of a centrist type of candidate and isn't necessarily running on this stuff, and he should where he is?
Well, I mean, as I said in that tweet, and as I say in my Business Insider article, the reality is that Georgia voters who were exit polled by Fox News, said repeatedly that they wanted more investment in solving the climate crisis, that they wanted to see a universal healthcare system, that they supported Black Lives Matter, not by as big of a margin as these other two policies, but and now Ossoff is running on. I mean, just today, there was an Axios interview that aired this morning, a portion of it, when he says that he's like, no, I'm not in favor of Green New Deal. No, I'm not in favor of Medicare for all. Then today he's talking about how he just wants to have access to healthcare, which is like, we all know what that means. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Does he want to win? I think he does. I think that he just believes that this kind of messaging is going to work, and it's just not. Maybe it will. I don't think that you can really predict how this message is going to land, because there's going to be so much other stuff going on swirling around this election. This election's probably like these two special elections. If I had to predict, I think maybe two of the most expensive elections, like statewide elections.
Oh, it's 100%. But I guess the point that I would make is like, okay, I mean, there were these polls that show that these are popular policies, but like the stuff that he's shying away from, Green New Deal, Medicare for all, the protests or whatever, like they're going to hammer him with that stuff anyway. They're going to call him a socialist anyway. They're going to say he's pro-criminal anyway. Like the idea that you're going to take this out of the hands of Republicans by shying away from it, it just defies logic. And, I see my own dad on here saying that without the win, there will be change for the worse. Progressing backwards is not progressive. Like, we're talking about how to win. Like, we're saying this is a way to win. We're not saying winning doesn't matter. We're saying this is a way to win by standing and being bold and offering a bold alternative. This is the path to winning. And what I found, especially in this last election, it's like centrism always seems to believe the answer is more centrism no matter what. If Hillary Clinton loses, she wasn't centrist enough. If Biden wins close, he wasn't centrist enough. Like, there's always a way to say we need to get away from these policies, but the policies are popular.
I think it sows distrust also among people. And I think that's why, like, a lot of, there's just obviously, based off of the popular vote, just all these democratic measures of obviously democratic policies and platforms are more popular. But I think that it is, those sort of more structural barriers aside, it is still difficult for us because I think that there is some distrust among people about like, well, I don't really see like what the benefit necessarily would be, just with these sort of like means tested, like into oblivion measures, centrist measures. Like what sort of benefit is that for me, essentially?
Right. Well, so we now move on to Georgia. Everybody should help out over in Georgia. Owen, hopefully you'll be covering this stuff. I definitely appreciate the article that you wrote. I think the dust up with AOC is really interesting. I know people have strong feelings one way or another about her. I appreciate that she's unapologetic about the things that she thinks and feels. Do you have any thoughts while we have you here about this coup that we're witnessing?
Yeah, I mean, I posted last night that I was unconvinced by that language, but now I'm not quite so sure. I don't. I gotta say, I mean, like, I'll put it this way. I've been really busy like the last 72 hours, basically. I've just been really, really slammed. So I hadn't really like had a chance to get a good sense of what's been like going on with it. All I knew is I like knew that he like was saying he wasn't going to concede. And
did you see the Pompeo clip?
I saw the Pompeo clip. That's a little disturbing.
Yeah.
It's a little, I don't know. I mean, I think that my position, I think, would be that it is not going to succeed. But that doesn't mean that it's not incredibly damaging for the what's left of our democratic institutions, for him to be trying and for him to have the support of so many members of the Republican Party. I'll also say that that's not an original thought. That's that's something that other people have said. I have found a lot of things that this president has done to be really disturbing in the way that it's pushed the Overton window. I know that's a total cliche, but like the way that it's pushed it to the right. And I find it disturbing not only in like what he does, but in how members of the right react to that, and how liberals have kind of laundered the reputation of a lot of right-wing people in a way that has presented kind of like these people who already pushed the window to the right, back in the 2000s, are now being presented as acceptable. So there's been a lot of that kind of stuff. I mean, I guess where I'm trying to go with this, I'm kind of rambling now, but where I'm trying to go with this is that I think that this is part of like a broader problem with how our democratic institutions are breaking down. And I think that, Trump is pushing this stuff. I don't think that there's any chance that he just doesn't leave office. He probably just storms out. I don't think he goes to inauguration or anything. Maybe he even quits before his term is up. My dream is that we have the year of 4 presidents in 2021. But who knows, right? I think that the damage to the institutions that's being done right now is bad. And I think that the long-term consequences of this, or even short-term, even in like 5 years when Biden or Harris lose to whoever they put up, then it's going to be even worse. So,
well, I agree. And I think that's part of, just to put a button on this conversation, what gave rise to Trump was a dissatisfied populace where they didn't think the government was helping them. And so if we have government continue not to help them, we're going to have another Trump, and he may not be such a buffoon. And so that's, I think, what we guard against by not enacting policies that truly, truly help people and change their lives. There are so many people hurting. We're basically in a depression right now. This is not the time to go back to any kind of status quo. This is a time to go forward. And that's what we're talking about. Call it what you want, label it what you want. We're talking about popular policy ideas that will help people. And that's the bottom line here. I want to show you one clip before we get you out of here, Owen. This was an MSNBC clip that everybody should enjoy. It kind of encapsulates what we're seeing right now.
How the Trump administration is handling the transition with the incoming Biden team, or not handling it, we should say, to a certain extent. This time, it involved our intelligence community. Ken, what have you learned, sir? Oh, shit. Okay.
I love that so much. I love the way he reacts.
It's like my mood.
Good. It's so good. All right. Well, I think that sums it up. Owen, thank you for joining us today. Stay in touch. We'll be reading the stuff you write. And it's interesting food for thought as we move forward, and hopefully a healthy discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Take care. All right. That was Owen.
All right.
Definitely follow Owen. We will be back on Thursday. We'll be tracking all this stuff. Subscribe to our emails and jump in with us next time. We appreciate you guys commenting. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely feel free to jump in and holler with us, at us during these holler hours. It's always great to have people in here. And, I think this is a healthy discussion. Yeah. I do, I know we both feel strongly. Maybe we should have someone on here who disagrees with us about this.
Yeah,
we certainly are open to it. And then, this was just as a one final clip. this was the thing that really hit home for me so hard the day after Biden won.
It's well, it's easier to be a parent this morning. It's easier to be a dad. It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters. Telling the truth matters. Being a good person matters. And it's easier for a whole lot of people. If you're Muslim in this country, you don't have to worry if the president doesn't want you here. If you're an immigrant, you don't have to worry if the president's going to be happy to have babies snatched away or send dreamers.
I'm not going to play the whole 2-minute clip, but I think Van was speaking for a lot of people right there.
Yeah.
And, you know, what just happened is a really big deal. The alternative still scares me to think about. And
we're not out of the woods yet.
We're not out of the woods yet. So everybody keep pushing, stay awake, and keep hollering with us. And we'll see you on Thursday at 2 p.m.
Thanks, y'all.